I'm Trauernicht. I've been working at the University of Hawaii as doing fire science, a lot of extension, and no one really ever knows what extension is, but extension is a really cool job at the university in which we're sort of mandated to take what's happening at the university and make it relevant to the public, whatever that sort of topic area is. I got to be fortunate to work in wildfire directly for about 10 years, and then more recently on other stuff like ecosystem, watershed restoration. And then I think the challenge for us is typically bringing what the people need, understanding and working with professionals out in the real world, trying to bring that back to the university, and trying to like coax all the wandering feral cats that are feral academics to work on stuff that has meaning and relevance to you all. So there's a challenge, but working with the people out in the real world is the best part of my job. And so I'm here to talk about wildfire resilient landscapes. My background is plants, and so if you're an ecologist, you know, there are plants. If you become a fire scientist, it all becomes fuels. And so part of this big three-prong, maybe, perspective, I'm like not remembering if we really talked about this big circle throughout the day, because I've been listening too much to the people and not looking at the slides, which is a good thing. But part of this big circle, this cohesive strategy, wildfire resilient landscapes or fire resilient landscapes, and what these mean and what the importance they play for the bigger picture in wildfire risk reduction. I think I'm not going to criticize like all of them. I'm just fortunate I don't have to talk about the built environment because that's outside of my wheelhouse. But there is a trend now, and we saw from the panel earlier, to the need to focus on the built environment is real. There are so many things we can do around houses, and at that scale, it's a really powerful tool and sort of area with which to engage the public because everybody's worried about their immediate surroundings and can take action. But I think for Hawaii, in particular, it is incredibly important that we don't forget or we learn the history of this place and remember that we did not have a wildfire problem as of a couple decades ago, 30 years ago. Like, we weren't seeing this problem that we're dealing with now. And the reason is not because our homes got less fire resilient, it's because the landscape around us became way more fire prone. And so I want to talk a little bit, in the brief time I have, I really want to cover three things, sort of that historical context super briefly. I actually have notes. I rarely do notes, but I wanted to kind of touch on things that people have been seeing that I've been hearing today. I want to talk about what we know right now, because we know a lot about what's driving this like change in our landscapes and the things we can do. And then sort of my thoughts on where the challenges lie ahead of us. And I think this speaks a lot to like what Kaina was talking about, like how do we like tackle this bigger picture thing? And that's, I'm like kind of took behind me because it's that whole landscape that's the other side of the fence maybe from our yards, right? And the reason that we can't lose sight of that is not only because this historical change, which I'll talk about in a second, in which fire risk has grown and changed in the communities where they sit, unlike, for example, in Colorado or something, or you know, the Malibu, where you're actually building into fire-adapted ecosystems, we've allowed these ecosystems to change around us. And it is on us. This is not something that may be intentional, but it's something we've allowed to happen. But the fires are impacting our watersheds in ways that are really beyond our capacity to recover and to repair in our lifetimes. And so I had a really interesting conversation. I went to an Association for Fire Ecology conference. It's like the first fire conference I went to in a long time, scientific conference. And I got to talk to this gentleman who's from a tribe in southern Colorado, and his perspective on it was from his tribal group where they're organizing these fire-wise principles, they're looking at fire management, using fire, reintroducing fire. From his perspective, he's like, hey, our homes are insured. We can evacuate, but we can't replace our forests. We can't replace the timber that's out there that we rely on for our livelihoods. Like that's you know, so there's another perspective that I don't want us to lose sight of. And I think the other thing is that, you know, when you think about Lahaina and where we are saying all the same things here, is like there was not enough resources we could have thrown at that place in the moment while the fire was burning to save that town. But I mean, if you want me to be blunt, like, that was avoidable. It was avoidable. We knew the risk in that landscape. We had seen fires there. I mean, we've mapped 9 fires in that general area, you know, 100 acres or larger over the past 25 years. There was a fire there in the same place in 2024 that burnt 4,000 acres up the mountain. You know, trashing native forests, native snail habitat, right? We lost homes in 2018, 21 homes, right? And so we have hit a couple of these moments in history where we have to stop ourselves and let that sink in, that these things are preventable, and that tragedy was avoidable. And I don't want us to like lose that emotion, that kind of emotional charge, whether it's anger, whether it's like the grief, you know. I think it's important that we recognize that. And so to my points, we can get on with the panel, but this historical context, so what we're dealing with is novel ecosystems, like completely new mixes of species that have been introduced from all parts of the world, all of these landscapes that we are now kind of worried about around our communities. We don't really have parallels for them, definitely not in the continental United States, where we're trying to use all these tools and import these tools, and they just don't work. I don't know if there's consultants in the room. I have endless conversations with people like that are trying to apply these tools. They don't work, so we need to do different systems and different approaches. And of course, our native ecosystems don't handle the kinds of fires that these new ecosystems produce. The flame lengths that these guinea grass can throw out, even buffalo grass can throw out during these really extreme events is phenomenal, incredibly dangerous, and they don't recover. Our ecosystems don't recover, and these grasses keep replacing themselves. I think people are really familiar with this pattern. But you know, the bottom line is this place is an incredible burden on the fire department, the firefighters, right? They're sort of on the front line, whether you're DOFA or county fire or Fed fire. This is really dangerous conditions for them to work in. But underlying all the kind of ecological, biophysical reasons that these places burn the way that they do is really a social and part of our history. And that is that we have lived through and now are sort of living in the aftermath of this large-scale industrialization of the landscape around us through sugar, right? Sugar was the main one. Grazing also occurred too, but you know, it was really the things around our communities where places were built. It was this large-scale transformation of these landscapes, and that transformation included a lot of social trauma as well, right? You're talking about dispossession of Hawaiian families in those lands, destruction of just incredibly sophisticated food systems, local low, right? So the damage, diversion of water that these systems causes, we're sort of like trying to grapple with now. They've all been pulled off the landscape, literally, all of it now, right? And this, I know this is familiar to everyone. This is what we're dealing with, but I think it's important to understand the scale of that transformation and what it's going to take to kind of cope with the scale of the fuels, the situation on the landscape that we need to deal with now. And like really simply put, it's just a lack of care, right? It's a lack of investment in the types of land care, land management, whatever you really prefer to call it. This could be, I'll get into what it could be, or what it is actually. It's not responding to the scale of the problem. And again, I know this is obvious for everybody, but I think it's really important that we understand this historical context that we're operating in, and sort of these stacking like injustices fundamentally that we are kind of having to address, right? So what we know right now is that, first of all, the options aren't infinite, right? It's not like we got to invent new things to deal with this problem. We can do reforestation, we can do agriculture, we can do cultural restoration, biocultural restoration, whatever you want to use, fish ponds, taro, agroforestry. Like, there's people working on these projects with the knowledge that can transform these ecosystems. Crazy. My gosh, the knowledge that's held in these old-time ranching families about how and when and where to move cattle on the landscape, super fundamental tools. We also know how to do conventional fire breaks. I mean, that is also like a baseline thing that we are not doing enough, or we don't have enough. And for anyone who's trying to maintain these things, I think very quickly start looking at these other alternatives to establish other forms of land use as an alternative, because you get really sick of mowing guinea grass and spraying. And so we have a really incredible resource wealth of knowledge to build from. We also know that, like, we can look at vegetation, we can look at fire risk across the landscape. The footprint of where these actions need to happen is also not infinite, right? So we can focus on these priority areas and make this problem tractable. Even, again, I know it's like the context of looking at this wall of flames coming at your landscape, even in the way we manage that vegetation to reduce the amount of embers that are coming. Grass don't produce embers. Grass burns and becomes ash. It's all that woody crap that's mixed in with the grass, Hawaiʻi, clue. It's the woody debris that's out in these things, all these old, unkept patches of kiawe. And we know how to manage vegetation. We know how to alter that vegetation to make safer conditions in the landscape surrounding our communities. So that's, like, huge. But then it sort of immediately turns us to, like, where we're facing ahead, and I think it's a good segue to invite these folks that are going to come up and talk to us today and kind of pitch this whole new world that we're in after Maui. I mean, the argument, is it enough? Like, no, but it's a start, right? And I think that what we are seeing in the projects that are emerging and the models that we're turning to, models, I mean like the people that we're turning to learn, people who have been working on transforming these landscapes, is that fire risk reduction aligns with all of these other benefits that people are working towards. I don't think, maybe not everybody, but almost everybody is not doing these projects because it's reducing fire risk, right? They want to better their communities. They want to produce food. They want to regrow native forests. They want to do these other things that they value, that they love. And it just so happens that so many of those targets, so many of those goals, risk reduction goes down, or sorry, fire risk goes down when you succeed at doing those. The problem is ultimately that we are not doing it at a scale that is really contributing to public safety. Like, if we want to take public safety seriously, we have to scale up these projects, we have to look at them across boundaries and see how do they line up, right, so they're really forming contiguous protection around our communities, and protecting around our communities, again, combined with built environment, changes to the built environment. It also protects our watersheds, which are, again, irreplaceable, right? I've seen entire willy forests go up in flames in a day. These are not coming back in my lifetime. I mean, we can collect seed, we can grow those seedlings, right? But these are things that are literally irreplaceable. I don't want us to lose sight of the Malka stuff, which is what a lot of us were working on for a long time, and before I could even imagine that something as horrific as Lahaina could happen. This is really where a lot of the people working in the fire space were concentrated on. And I think the difficult piece in my mind, and difficult personally just because I'm trying to figure out how the system works, but ultimately it becomes a political question. It becomes a question of, if we need to make these changes, what are the policies that we could put in place that would, A, provide funding to get these projects going? So this is the HUI grant that we're going to talk about in a second as a perfect example. What are policies that will actually incentivize agricultural production? I mean, when you're looking at $2 million an acre for land on Oahu, and farmers cost money. We need living wages for people, for workers. We need living wages for people that we imagine maybe going out and cutting guinea grass and trying to replant these forests. I don't quite think of this, and this is my opinion, that there's a really easy market solution. This is going to depend on government policy. It's going to depend on us holding our leaders to account, but also providing them with examples of projects that work, programs that are providing these multiple benefits beyond just fire risk reduction. I mean, if we did the vision that the communities that I've been working with over the past 15 years on this have for the lands around them, like, we don't have to worry about fire. We shouldn't have to worry about fire. And so all of these things, talking about people that don't have homes, right? What are we doing for them? What the risk that problem that we fail and continue to fail to deal with creates for us in the terms of ignition sources, open fires, things like that, right? So it gets overwhelming and it gets really big, but again, the fundamental and structural problems that I think we're in a position to address are ultimately these benefits that are going to make society better for all of us involved, make things better, landscapes more healthy, able to withstand not only fires but flooding, right? This other connection to the landscape above us is that watershed restoration is the only tool we have directly that can help slow down the flow of water. So the management of the vegetation for reducing fire risk is directly tied to managing the vegetation to make our community safe from other disasters like floods, which I know is the top of everyone's mind. And so with that, I think it's really cool to have this opportunity to get this going, invite Eric Moller up to invite our folks to share the projects that they've taken on, and sorry for not checking my time, but thanks, Melissa.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started as you're sitting down and getting your lays, and I'm going to go over a short, brief overview of who we are. So good morning and good afternoon, and thank you for all being here. My name is Eric Moller, and I'm with the Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management Organization, where I help lead and manage the grant program that we're going to talk about today. It's an honor to bring together this group of partners, practitioners, and community leaders who are actively shaping wildfire resilience across Hawaii. For today's session, I'll provide a brief overview of the Hawaiʻi Urban Interface Wildfire Grant Program, which is the new HUI, as was talked about earlier today. And I'll get into the program that's provided by the Department of Land and Natural Resources Division of Forestry and Wildlife, administered in partnership with us at the Hawaiʻi Wildfire. Sorry, pages are sticking together. It's after lunch, so I ask you to please bear with me as we go through it. I know much of the conversation this morning focused on the built environment. We could do at the home and the community level and through the planning and policy reduce wildfire risk. And that work is incredibly important. Wildfire outcomes, however, are shaped by both the building environment and the surrounding landscape. And even though it was only about 200 acres that burned outside of Lahaina before it became an urban conflagration, those acres mattered as well. It's what happens before it gets into our communities that are so truly important. This grant program really focuses on the outer layer, the fuels in the landscape that surround and connect our communities together. And it's there where we have to work together. Managing these larger landscape fuels, many of them crossing fence lines, jurisdictions, and boundaries, it takes significant and sustained resources. And that was something that the state and us realized very early on, especially after Lahaina, but this has been a problem that's been around for quite some time. In reality, many don't, especially when we're talking about managing fuels at scale, understand what those resources are. There are federal funding sources available like the Wildland Urban Interface Grant Program and the Community Wildfire Defense Grant Program. Those programs are extremely competitive, and Hawaii has to compete with larger states and places where wildfire risk is more widely known in the continental U.S. And these grants are no longer even a reliable source as the geopolitical environment has changed. So there's a clear gap between the scale of the problem and the resources available to address it locally. That's what led to the creation of this program. With the support of the state legislature, $1.5 million was allocated to the State Division of Forestry and Wildlife as a pilot for a Hawaii-based solution. The program was designed specifically for our landscapes, our communities, and our needs. It's something that we compete locally, where we're not, bound on dealing with the other 50 states as far as the funding is concerned. It's intended to support real work on the ground, projects that can move quickly and make tangible differences quickly. At its core, the program supports three main objectives. Fuels reduction, I'm sorry, I don't want this slide, I think. Here we go. Fuels reduction, resilient landscapes, and community-based capacity. All with the goal of reducing wildfire risk before a fire starts. So our communities and natural and cultural resources are better protected. And it's important that we take that all into consideration in what we do. Addressing fuels in the landscape, especially around our neighborhoods, helps reduce fire intensity, slow the rate of spread, and improve firefighter safety when we do have these confrontations. What makes this program unique is that it focuses on shovel-ready projects. These are efforts where planning is complete, partnerships are already in place, and work can begin immediately just with the lack of funding, getting the funding in there. It's about getting resources directly to the ground where they can have the greatest impact. We're still in the pilot year of this program. Last year we awarded 9 projects and received about 22 applications. So the interest and need were already high, even without a full outreach effort in trying to get people to submit their projects. The projects funded this past year represent a range of approaches across the state, from fuels reduction and grazing to community-based planning and partnerships. Each one of these reflects the on-the-ground implementation. This work's helped create a safer community and communities, more resilient landscapes, and improves wildfire outcomes. We know wildfires are going to happen, but if we can leverage it to be a safer and a less impactful result, I think we're meeting the objective of where we're going with this grant. It's about stewarding and caring for the landscape, so it can care for us in return. Wildfires are here to stay, but they don't have to be so destructive if we prepare our communities and our landscapes and do the work ahead of time. And this program is just the start. The need for this kind of funding in Hawaii is ongoing and growing. We just launched the 2nd year of this program. The application period is now closed. We received double the number of applicants, with 43 total being accepted, and will be awarded another $1.5 million over the next couple of months. To truly make progress, however, it's going to require continued and even more investment year after year. This is not a one-and-done kind of approach. It's something that's long-term and trying to make true conversion on the wide areas that we have. This is a model that is demonstrating success, and one that we hope will continue to expand and support the landscapes across the state. We now have the opportunity to hear directly from these the grantees. These are the individuals and organizations who have taken their shovel-ready ideas and turned them into action through grant funding. They'll share with you what they've done, what they've learned, and what others can take away from their experience. So, we're going to hear from directly from the projects funded throughout the pilot year of this program. You'll hear from our grant recipients about their work on the ground, their experiences with the grant program. One of the key things we're hoping to highlight through this conversation is how this program is supporting folks who may have limited resources as they steward the landscapes around their communities to keep them healthy and thriving. These projects really show what becomes possible when the gap is filled. Each project looks a little different depending on the landscape and community, but they share a common goal: addressing fuels at the landscape scale in ways that help protect communities and natural resources. Let me please introduce our panelists as they're up here, and then we'll get into some specific questions that they can answer. First, I'd like to introduce Terry DeJarnay from West Kohala Wildfire Alliance via the North Kohala Resource Center, whom is their fiscal sponsor, located on the northeast side of Hawaii Island. Just raise your hand, Terry. Next would be Eric Enos from Kahala Farms, located on the west side of Oahu. We have William Jacinto, Hawaii Rangeland Stewardship Foundation, located on Maui. Raise your hand, one. Okay, and then the last and definitely not least is Shona Kaluka Kukui, and I hope I didn't butcher that, I'm sorry. Kalapa Homestead Association, another one located on the northwest side of Hawaii Island. Mahalo all for being here and for the work that you're doing. So to get us off into the actual questions, we'll start with, can each of you briefly share what your project focused on and how you decided what approach to take in the community landscape? And we'll start with Terry, please.
Good afternoon. Our project focused on developing defensible space and fire breaks around the communities. All of our communities front the Kona Highway, and all of them need that exit route. But all of the homes are threatened by wind-driven fires that come down the slope and trade winds that go up to 45, 50 miles per hour, and the slope of the land. So we have a definite threat. But what we did was collaborate our ideas and our different groups, and we came up with grazing, mechanical, and I lost my thought. Anyway, we worked and collaborated with the fire department, got what they want, and tried to meet with them. We met with the Department of Transportation. We met with County Roads and Maintenance, and we learned that we can do certain things in certain areas. They don't want goats next to the highway, and some of the landowners did not want goats on their land, but we were we came up with a solution for that and provided as much fuel breaks as we could.
All right, thank you. Eric?
So, aloha, good afternoon. I'm from Waianae. We're in the back of Waianae Valley on Oahu. And I'd like to address that in our area, it has the most set fires in the entire state because we have the entire back of the valley is a previous ranch that we got turned over to the community, about 1,100 acres. We have 97 acres of Hawaiian homelands. Then we're up against the Waianae Forest Reserve. But right along that road that leads up to our learning center has the most set fires in the entire state. So it's like almost every summer it's set. And so we've had a series of major fires. And so some of our strategies, and I can go into the short story or the long story, and I'll go through the short, is that we're really working on a multitude of ways to, we're looking at animal grazing, sheep, we're looking at green fire breaks, we're looking at controlling, because it's all human set. Our area is the most, it's almost like it's a lot of criminal elements and a lot of homelessness and a lot of people that steal cars and light those cars on fire. So it's really a multitude of approaches. And so we're working on all of these elements, and we have our green fire breaks, we also have sheep, we have people we're just trying to hold down that, but that's, and I could go on, but I just want to set the context for the back of Waianae Valley.
Thanks, Eric. William?
We focus on community safety first and do the project in Waihe and Waiego, reducing fuel load with livestock grazing, mainly sheep and cattle, and we also did some mechanical integration. Once the animals chewed a lot of the forage down, and we could kind of see what was in the grass. By doing the mechanical integration, we were able to bring the loads down to the ground completely. And now the animals should be able to take over, and this also reduces fossil fuels. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. And then Shauna.
My name is Shauna Kawikukui. I sit on the board of directors for Kailapa Community Association. Kailapa is located north of the Big Island. We have it's a homestead, so we have approximately 500 residents in our subdivision. Our community is located between two large ravines, and outside of those ravines is 325 acres of unmanaged judicial land. So for this project, we focused on a grazing management plan that would be able to bring sustainability and stewardship for our community.
All right, well, thank you, Mahalo. And it really shows the range of the different projects. And this is just a small sampling of the 9 projects that were awarded last year that cover many different areas and different approaches to actually fuels mitigation and training the communities and teaching them, wildfire actions that they can take to minimize risk. Moving on, can you share what this grant made possible and how it changed what you were able to do on the ground? We're going to start with Terry, if that's okay.
Department of Transportation, after the
You may want to get that mic a little closer.
building. Department of Transportation came in after the Lahaina fire and Bed fire the same day, and provided a dirt pathway around all the communities. We took this dirt, bare dirt ground, and we added a fuel break. It's 200 foot wide. That 200 foot wide fuel break, if the ember wash gets stopped sooner, we're hoping that it'll stop that ember wash from getting into our homes. We grazed 140 acres, 2.5 miles of highway. We did a 30-foot strip alongside the highway to eliminate the ember from a cigarette, and hopefully maybe arson would be a little more difficult. And we opened up secondary exits and got in and did some grazing in the gulches as well. And this wouldn't have happened without that, definitely.
All right, thanks, Terry. Eric?
Just set some context. We have approximately 1,100 acres that was turned over us from DLNR. Was the old ranch, and the whole entire top part of it is a cultural, historic preservation area. So that includes about 3,000 acres. So the areas that we're really working, that is being lit, are all cultural sensitive areas. So we just can't go inside there. We have all our means of protecting the fire has to be ways that we cannot use heavy machinery to bulldozers and things like that. The second thing is that what's really important is to network with our partners. We're partnering with all the agencies about water supply, Hawaiian Electric. We have Hawaiʻi Wildfire has made many of these grants possible. We have we have the military right over the ridge with us. We have the Waianae Mountain Watershed Partnership, so with DLNR, DOFA, so all these different partners have to come to the room and sit down and figure out how we're going to work with this. We also have the Waianae Homestead DHHL community, so all this has to be networked and done. And what we have to do is develop alliances, and then also working with the schools, work very closely with the schools, because if we don't get the children involved, because they're going to be the future leaders that will take on these issues. So these are just some of there's a lot of strategies that we're working on, but I just want to touch on a few just to lay a foundation that it really is a community-wide effort, and we're dealing about close to 3,000 to 5,000 acres, and that these fires are lit almost every single summer, and it also includes the adjoining areas and properties. So.
All right, thank you. And Shauna?
This grant allowed me to collaborate with livestock agents, people from the university. I was able to network and create alliances with breeding specialists from not just the Big Island, but also from on Oahu and Maui. This grant allowed me to put on workshops. We learned about animal health, how to manage the land, and educate people in our community about what our land requires to keep it, sustainable.
All right, well, thank you. It's great to hear how these projects are all making a difference, not just on the landscape, but in the communities as well, and the people that live within those communities. Move on to our next question, which is, what have you learned along the way, especially the parts that were more challenging than expected? Will, you want to take a shot at that?
Our challenges were finding the exterior fences because the grass was so tall. The grazing, once we did that, the grazing exposed more obstacles like loose wires, rocks, uneven terrains, for us to move forward with the mechanical work. Without the grant, we wouldn't be able to afford the mechanical part. Now we're hoping, the hope is and the goal is to balance the grazing rotation.
All right, thank you. I just was curious if you might want to add just a little, when you say finding the fences, what was the issue there? Because I think that would be interesting for everybody to know.
Yeah, it had been grazed for about 1.5 years, and guinea grass, as you all know, just goes crazy. And so pretty much covered a lot of the fencing, so just about an edger and edged my way following the fence, at least the border. And then we worked with the interior fences after, once the animals kind of found it. But they also found a lot of old wire, some rolls of hog wire, and what they didn't find, they found with the tractor, and he pulled up production. So you guys might want to watch for that.
Makes sense. Eric, want to take a crack at this?
Well, if you look at the history of fire and what Clay talked about, it's the loss of agricultural lands and agricultural uses. So when these lands became fallows, that's when they became vulnerable. So we got to bring back community-based agriculture and not one mono system of agriculture. So we have to start breaking these areas out into small farms that people can grow food and plants with food, medicine, fiber, adornment, energy, and spiritual uses. So if people can use the land, then they don't abuse the land. So this is the kind of stuff that we have to work with. We have to work with all our agencies, and we have to grow more farmers. And I'm talking about family farms, yeah, and then self-help. For example, we're of the school that we grow the best rabbit hutches and chicken coops that people can actually use. And then all the alternative ways of building. We build with stone, with mud, with fiber, traditional structures, incorporate that, and the kind of food that we are growing, because the situation right now, we're importing how much of our food? 85–90%, and the price is not going down. So, for example, we're working on cuisine, working on like Karo noodles, ulu noodles, all those kinds of dishes. So if the land is valuable and it's used, people aren't going to burn it down. And who burns it down is a mental health issue. It's a spiritual health issue. So we got to get to those people. That's why mental health and care. And so these are if we get it at the root of this problem, then we can at least make a dent.
Excellent, thank you. Terry?
I'd just like to add that the terrain was a challenge, and our goat grazer he had issues putting up fencing in some of these steep areas, and he actually took a fall, not hurt badly, but he did get hurt. Then we developed a plan to have a group that texted, he would tell us, res text, Hambonian, so that we knew, because he was putting a lot of these fences on his own, and if he got hurt, would be back. So, just a little safety thing that we developed. And then one and last thing is entry use permits. They can stop a project like that. If you don't have permission to go into some of these land, even though you're doing them a service and clearing some of the area, it can stop it, and you can take your whole project and just grind it to a halt. So get the permits early and think ahead and get everything done as soon as you can.
Very good, thank you. Those are lessons that are definitely just as valuable as the outcomes are, especially for others looking to do similar work in future years. For communities or organizations thinking about applying for this grant, or maybe for those that will hear next week whether or not their applications for this upcoming year were approved and accepted, what advice would you give to them? Shauna?
My best advice is to make sure that you have a purpose. Not just a short term, but a long term. You have to have a long term goal. And it doesn't matter how big or how small, right? Make sure that it's manageable and you can maintain and move forward. Another really important step is to make sure that you develop partnerships. So through my grant, I was able to, I coordinated with ranchers, local ranchers. I coordinated with DHL, our neighbors, right? We have neighboring communities and private landowners. So all those things are definitely things that you need to think about and to make sure that you have all those, have measurable goals so that you'll have a really successful outcome.
Thank you. Terry?
I would say on your documentation, take your before and after pictures. It's hard to get the before picture after it's already cleaned up. Tell me, I haven't been there. Make sure that you start early. Things take time. Bids can be very slow, and then getting back to people and getting them out there and recognizing and getting everybody did the same thing, because each contractor has a little bit different ideas. So you have to be specific and write it out as much as you can, and so that everybody gets an opportunity to bid on the same thing.
Very good. Eric?
I think you have to prepare for the future by getting the youth involved. It's very important. We're working with the youth programs, Nanakuli High School, Waianae High School, and then also working with the community colleges. And then part of it is getting the new generation of scientists, local scientists, biologists, botanists. So we're developing that with our summer programs, finding kids that really want to invest in their communities, that want to be part of the solution. Because, we're getting old, none of us is, so we have to pass that bad pun, but the torch, and then find a way and this is what we are doing, and we have programs, summer programs, working with youth, get them involved in policies, get them involved in fire, and understanding fire, and understanding how things grow, and then understanding ways that they can become part of the solution. And then work on, because a lot of these issues are mental health issues, spiritual health issues, working with the health centers, working with community health, mental health, spiritual health. So, because people who start, because for us it's arson, and arson is a disconnect of a child to their roots. So we have to go back to our roots. I don't care what your culture is, but we're all, pro Hawaiʻi, and we have to be very cognizant that we're all one planet, one people, and one place, and we really got to look at caring for each other.
And William, do you have anything to put out there?
I'll make it quick. Just have a good strategic plan and have community in mind. I think the panel touched on everything.
So to close out, I'd like to hear from each of you, what's your next project, or what gives you hope as this work continues in your own areas? And I'll start with Sean.
Future plans for Kailapa would be to install permanent fencing in paddocks, to create a grazing program and a defensible space that surrounds ongoing stewardship and maintaining community engagement. These efforts to sustain land health, cultural practice, and wildfire resistance in Kailapa and surrounding areas. With a grazing management plan in place that we just completed, I'm hoping to install with the upcoming grant fencing that our contract grazers will not have to come in and have to deal with the safety issue, that we already have permanent fencing up so that they could just put in their boats. And it's also planned so that you can utilize, the homesteaders can utilize the area, the unused area, right, the HHL land. A lot of the lessees in our homestead, they lease land so that they can, raise their cattle. And my plan is to let those lessees, or even, neighboring communities to bring in their, whether it's cattle, whether it's sheep or goat, just to provide some place that they don't have to go and lease land. They can use the land that is right behind their back door. So that's in the future, hopefully we can get that done.
Thank you so much. Terry?
A lot of it is just rinse and repeat. I mean, we need to go back and over what we did and make sure it's maintained. What's next? We need to get some things completed. We could make contact with the owners, the absentee owners, and the lack of ability to contact them. Enough projects totally undone. So, I mean, there's still projects out there. We can always do more. We can always make the spaces, defensible spaces around homes, and then the fuel breaks larger. I think that's our biggest focus, is work on those.
Thank you. William?
For this project, we just got to continue the grazing and keeping up with that. Fencing is a challenge because it's in a real salty area, a lot of wind breeze right off the coast, and salt air melts wider. And so every 3 years or so, it'll have to be, replaced. So that would be an ongoing thing. We're also looking to our other areas, other locations, for this type of, fire reduction projects. So hopefully more area will come in. We're a small ranch, and we'd like to expand at the same time.
All right, Derek?
Fire and flooding, two things that happen, yeah. So if you can, for example, we had Kona 1 and Kona 2, and then we had Mānoa 1, yeah, and it's just devastating. But look at all that water. But so the new climate changes is what is happening. We have these rain bombs, and then we have long periods of drought. So what we're trying to do is, for flooding, we're trying to create these beaver dams of the desert. In other words, we're trying to take this flood water and then redirect it. This is the kind of strategies we're working on now, yeah, and to create these basins, because then if you can recharge groundwater, because the projections on climate change and drought is really sobering. This that the weather is changing, but we got to take advantage of what is happening now, and then we start putting in these places that we can start growing these areas. We need to grow farmers, young farmers. We have to be able to subsidize them so that they can grow food for their family and for their community. If Hawaii is going to be importing more and more and more of its food, we're in a big problem. Yeah. So these are the kind of issues, and we have to put our heads together and have all the agencies. And this is why in the room we're working with all the agencies. For example, we used to fight like heck with the border water supply, but we fought clean. So now they're our best friend. Hawaiian Electric, working with them with power, because so projects like that, and of course with the forestry, very good partners with the forestry and wildlife. Working with Mike. The stuff that's working out there. Waianae Mountain Watershed Partnership, working with the military. Waianae has the most military lands, so working with the Navy, and say, hey, let's work together and let's work on these problems. As a group, we can put down, and these are things we are actively working on. They aren't pie in the sky dreams. So we are having these kinds of, and then people to facilitate discussions like this. You really have to have really good facilitators, and you have to have the right people in the room who have that mission and goal. It's not about me, it's about us, the whole thing.
Very good. Thank you. You're hired. We got a few minutes if there's any questions from the audience, any of the panelists, there's your chance.